test. Can everyone hear me? You can also scooch into the middle here, so you have a better view. No, it's going to be boring.
When the weather gets nice, I see that as.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's all working today, John. So I will turn this over to Ulrike. I'm just interrupting her for a moment because I can't stay until the end. I have to go for a meeting. So I want to acknowledge, Ulrike, this treasure that you offer us, and thank your husband and your daughter for sharing you with us on every Thursday night. Yeah. So when I think about the history of art, that you know much better than I do, but the fact that art has been such a reality in the life of the church, the Catholic Church, but the broad sense of the world, and that you bring it to us and it kind of regenerates the gift of art and how it touches our own journey and our own walk. So with tremendous gratitude from the Co-Cathedral, we thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Yeah. I just asked her, so what are you going to do with her Thursday nights? I'm sure she'll find plenty.
Yes. Welcome tonight and good evening to everyone here at the Co-Cathedral of St. John the Evangelist. And also I would welcome everyone on the live stream for our sixth and last session of our reflections on Lent and the events of Easter through art. And one more time, I would like to remind everyone to please use the microphone, because it really helps everyone, even in the chapel, to hear each other, and particularly then for everyone on the live stream to hear your questions, comments, suggestions, so reflections. Thank you very much. Last week, we reflected on Christ's passion. The word passion comes from the Latin word for suffering. Christ's passion is the story about injustice, doubt, fear, pain, and ultimately degrading death. It tells how Christ experienced these things in the same way an ordinary human being would. This week, our first painting is the Deposition, also known as the Entombment of Christ, by the Baroque Italian painter Caravaggio, painted circa 1600 to 1604. Our second work of art is the painting The Resurrection by the German Gothic painter Matthias Grünewald. It is one of the panel of a complex polytriptych altarpiece in Colmar in France, created circa 1512 to 1516. With our last work of art of this evening in this Lenten reflection series, I would like to highlight one of our own works of art here at the Co-Cathedral. It is our beautiful Marian bronze sculpture, Mary Waiting, and it's in our Marian shrine just over here to my left. It was created by Joseph Aspel in 2004, and it was installed in the Marian shrine just here to my left, with the stunning glass wall depicting Michelangelo's Pietà in 2005. Last week, at the beginning of our reflection, I provided a brief overview on different materials used for the creation of sculptures, with a particular focus on ivory. Tonight, I would like to focus on the history of the use of bronze for the creation of sculptures, with actually a particular emphasis on the development and the history of bronze sculptures in the United States, which is quite interesting, actually. So, what is bronze? Bronze is a metal alloy made primarily out of copper with lesser amounts of tin. So, statuary bronze is 90% copper and 10% tin. The discovery of bronze goes back to circa 3500 BC, a period when men began using bronze to make tools and weapons. Bronze is harder and stronger than pure copper. Therefore, it is ideal for objects for everyday use, but also for the creation of sculptures. The tradition of casting bronze sculptures originated contemporaneously in Greece, Africa, and Asia. The two primary methods of bronze casting are sand casting and lost wax casting. And I will just briefly run over the definition of these methods. Unfortunately, it would take an hour to go through the individual methods and show you examples. But however, there are lovely educational YouTube videos out there if you are interested in following these different methods. So sand casting is a casting method that uses sand molds to shape and produce metal objects and components. Sand casting is one of the oldest known casting processes, and it is valued for its flexibility, cost effectiveness, and ability to create complex shapes. Sand casting offers great versatility in terms of size and weight of the casting it can produce. It is suitable for small-scale custom productions and large-scale industrial applications, such as automobile parts and others. The lost wax casting, also known as surprodure, is an ancient process where metal alloys are made into a design form of a wax mold. Throughout the years, the lost wax casting process has been used for the creation of utilitarian objects, sculptures, ornaments, and jewelry. One of the main advantages of lost wax casting is the ability to replicate the same model many times over. The most common metals used for the process are bronze, but also silver and gold. On this slide, we see a bronze sculpture created circa 2500 BC. Interestingly, very few ancient bronze sculptures can be found today, since bronze statues met various destinies. Some of the sculptures were subject to corrosion from oxidation and the weather. Other sculptures were lost in transport, the casualties of shipwrecks. So we find again and again, when divers go through the oceans, we find again and again sculptures that have been lost, and they can tell us more and more about the history of these, the times. However, many bronze sculptures were melted down and reused, since bronze is a very precious and valuable metal. And it was just a side story again, it struck me on Tuesday, I was at Mass, and the first reading was from Numbers chapter 21, verse 9, and it says, Moses accordingly made a bronze serpent. So, and Moses was alive around 1526 BC. So again, it was even, there's multiple mentioning of the use of bronze throughout the Bible, particularly the Old Testament. Sure.
Welcome back. When they're casting, is the bronze not hot?
It is hot initially, yes.
And how do they stabilize the sand or whatever to not melt or?
So the sand actually can withstand the heat of the hot molten bronze.
Okay, so they're both, the bronze in both of those cases are hot.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
It's fluid. It's a molten. Yeah.
The sand also has additives in it that keep it from collapsing and that sort of thing. So it's not just loose, dry sand. It has additives in it that cause it, because with the
it has the particular moisture as well to obviously not collapse in itself. And
but there are things they put in the sand. It's not just pure sand, so that it will hold its shape reliably. Because they can cast with a lot of detail, gears and all kinds of things out of bronze,
Yeah. The equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius was created circa 173 to 176 BC. Survived, actually, because it was mistakenly believed to depict Constantine the Great, the first Christian Roman emperor, thus preventing its destruction or melting down for its bronze, which commonly happened to other Roman statues. And luckily, many Roman statues were then copied into marble, and that's why we often know how the bronze sculptures looked like, because the marble was stayed around and wasn't destroyed. Now, turning our attention to the United States. Although the tradition of bronze casting has been established centuries before in other parts of the world, America did not have the experienced workforce to cast bronze sculptures until the mid of the 19th century. Initially, American artists were dependent on European foundries to cast their clay creations in bronze. The ancient technique of casting sculpture in bronze took a fresh turn in 1849 when Henry Kirk Brown, an American sculptor who had spent 4 years in Italy, created the 22-inch tall sculpture Choosing of the Arrow, one of the first bronze sculptures cast in the United States. Just shortly after that, in 1853, Clark Miles, another American sculptor, designed and cast the monumental equestrian Andrew Jackson sculpture, which was placed in Lafayette Park in Washington, D.C., in front of the White House, and it's still there. These two sculptures and others that were casted during that time used the method of sand casting. This method was economical and technically less demanding. A number of foundries established themselves over the next decades, specializing in bronze sand casting. However, then, at the end of the 19th century, Riccardo Bertelli, an Italian immigrant, established a foundry, Roman Bronze Works, in New York. He introduced the lost wax method to the United States and committed his exclusive use. The introduction of lost wax casting was the most significant technical development in bronze casting in America. The lost casting method is time-consuming, labor-intense, and requires a highly skilled workforce. This method, however, enables the creation of intricate, complex, and detailed forms through the flexibility to make changes to the model throughout the casting process. And unfortunately, if we could go through the details, I could show you, because with the lost wax casting method, what happens, a wax model is being created of the clay model that was initially created by the artist. So actually casting is an interesting form of art, because it's not just the artist. If you think of painting, it's the artist's input, and it's all his work, more or less. I mean, we had workshops, then people would maybe help some, but it's mostly the artist that has the full input in this. But bronze orbit casting, it's a collaboration between the artist that produces the initial clay model and then works with the foundry, and they are the experts in making either the sand molds, or for the lost wax method, they are the experts to help make the wax model. And that stays around. It's in some way it doesn't get lost, and so the artist has, again, unfortunately, I can't go too much into the, but it stays around, so the artist, you can use it again and again, and also in between, the artist can make small changes. So if the artist would like to add a little bit more detail to, like, the pans of the figure or anything. So he has the ability, he or she has the ability to add little details even throughout the casting process.
In Rochester, Chuck Gagnon was an artist who did work in bronze, and I think he used the hot wax thing.
Okay.
And the statue in the downtown here, around the stores, that statue of the birds is his work.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you all know, but his wife still lives here and maintains a display on her property of his work.
Yeah, I think you can make appointments to go into the museum. Yes, yeah. Just to highlight one example. So the famous American illustrator, painter, sculptor, and author of the American West, Frederick Remington, was actually one of the first artists to transfer his models from a sand casting foundry, the Henry Bonnard foundry, to the Roman bronze works, to be able to cast his bronze with the lost wax method. Remington created a total of 22 individual sculptures. Here we see the sculpture, the Cheyenne. And during Remington's lifetime, approximately 20 casts of the Cheyenne were produced, and about 70 were produced posthumously, demonstrating the ability of the artist to create an exceptional range of detail and texture in a large number of replicas. The lost wax casting method became the predominantly used method for the casting of bronze sculptures in the United States and worldwide. And with this little brief overview of bronze sculpting, I would like now to turn over to our works of art of the evening. Our first work tonight is a deposition, also known as the Entombment of Christ, by the Italian Baroque artist Caravaggio, painted between 1600 and 1604. 3 weeks ago, we reflected on the painting The Sacrifice of Isaac, also by Caravaggio. I have printed a summary about the life of Caravaggio on your handout. However, this time I will just mention a couple of additional details instead of reading this out again. Caravaggio spent several years of his short life in Rome, where the wealthy aristocratic and cardinal families of the Vatican commissioned many of his most important works. 26 of his 78 works of art can be found in Rome. And here is a list of selected Caravaggio paintings in Rome. Just again, keeping everyone in mind who might travel to Rome this year for the Holy Year, you might hopefully have an opportunity to go and see some of these works. So there's 3 works of art by Caravaggio in the Church of San Luigi dei Francesi. It's about the life of St. Matthew, and it has the calling of St. Matthew, inspiration of St. Matthew, and the martyrdom of St. Matthew. And I had the pleasure to see them a couple of years ago, and what we do here is good, and it's good to see the works of art. It's better than nothing, but seeing them in their environment, or at least in the museum, and then with these ones that are in the church, they're in their environment that they're painted for, it's amazing. It's really, really wonderful to be able to see them and experience them. Then there's 2 Caravaggio paintings in the Santa Maria del Popolo church, and it's the Crucifixion of St. Peter and the Conversion of St. Paul. Again, stunning works of art. There's one of my favorite paintings in the Basilica di Santa Agostino. It's the Madonna of Loreto. Just a beautiful work of art. And then the Galleria Borghese has 3 works of art by Caravaggio. And then there's other places dotted throughout Rome where you can find work of art by Caravaggio. The Deposition, considered one of Caravaggio's greatest masterpieces, was commissioned by Girolamo Vitris for his family chapel in Santa Maria in Vallicella in Rome. So remember, that was in 1604 when it was finished. In 1797, the painting was included in a group of works transferred to the Louvre in Paris in execution of the Treaty of Tolentino. The Treaty of Tolentino was a consequence of Napoleon's successful Italian campaign during the French Revolutionary Wars. So, as we all know, Napoleon liked to collect works of art, and he collected them all across Europe and brought them to the Louvre in Paris. Luckily, the Deposition was returned in 1817, following Napoleon's defeat in 1815 and the Congress of Vienna, and became part of the Pope Pius VII's Pinacoteca at the Vatican, where it can be seen today. With a little caveat again, so this year is the World Exposition in Osaka in Japan. And the Vatican had agreed, because they have a pavilion there, and they have agreed to send the Deposition to Japan, to the World Exhibition. And it's going to be there from April the 13th to October the 13th. And it just kind of, I thought it was just very interesting. The motto of the Italian pavilion at the exhibition is "Art generates life." And the Holy Seas sector will have the motto "Beauty brings hope." And so I thought that was very fitting. As you consider Caravaggio's painting, I would like to quote from the Gospel of John, chapter 19, verses 39, 40, and 42. Nicodemus, the one who had first come to him at night, also came. They took the body of Jesus and bound it with bur cloth, along with the spices. So they laid Jesus there because of the Jewish preparation day, for the tomb was close by. And now I invite any of your comments, reflections, questions.
I don't know who the figure is on the left, but it almost looks as if there are angel wings above his head.
So if there, it looks like it.
Angel wings?
Angel?
The wings of an angel.
Oh.
Is
So
is
right here?
No, on the other side.
The left.
The other
Oh,
side
that's
there.
actually. I looked at this very closely. I think it's just kind of a background. Yes, yeah. I looked even with a flashlight on the painting to see, but I think it's a little bit. There's a dark background, so it's a very non-telling background. But I think this is kind of part of the background.
So I'm kind of struck by what I think is probably John in the back there.
Yeah. So John is over here with his young face and
Always over there.
and the green and then the red. cloak.
Okay. And is that an angel in the back with the arms up?
So this is John, this is Nicodemus, who helps. And then we have the three Marys, Mary of Clopas, Mary Magdalene, and the
Okay.
Virgin Mary.
Beautiful. So I love the kind of gesture, which could mean lots of things, you know. Could even be a prompt that we know there's going to be more, maybe.
Yeah.
Or, you know, kind of calling upon God. I don't know. It just gives such an expression of multiple possibilities. you
Yeah.
know.
And I think the three Marys as a group also depict a variety of how one can deal with suffering. I think the lady.
In your notes, you comment that this painting was in the service of the Catholic Counter-Reformation.
Mhm.
So what was the expectation as to how the painting would advance that and maybe help people not turn to the Protestant Reformation?
Right. So yeah, thank you for the question. So yeah, Caravaggio was a poster child for producing works of art for the Counter-Reformation, and the call from the Catholic Church to the artists was to produce works of art that were easily readable. So without a lot of background knowledge, you could work out who the figures are. What is the story that's being depicted? So I think it's quite clear, even if someone wouldn't be too savvy with the Bible, that it was after the death of Jesus Christ. So they're readable, they're accessible, but it's also, I didn't bring a comparison picture, but if you quite often would think of paintings with a similar theme, quite often they're set back a little bit. With this one, it's actually, I have so like this, I zoomed into the bottom here. If you look at even the stone slab, it almost looks like it's poking out of the canvas. It's kind of reaching into our space. And that, again, is something artists were asked to do, to involve us as much as possible. And then if we go back, so we could be standing right, I mean, we could be part of this group. I mean, I could imagine if a man would be standing here, he could say, oh, I'm going to help you lowering this body. So those are a couple of qualities that were asked, the church asked the artists to implement into the works of art.
So this is a little bit different aspect of the picture, but there's no stigmata visible on Jesus at all.
Right. So the Italians, so again, if we would compare an Italian painting with a Spanish painting, the Italians tended or liked to be bloodless and not to so much show the stigmata. We do have, and I have another zoom in here, we do see the wound, the stab wound of, but that's just very much an Italian style. They didn't want to show so much the blood or the lesions or the infliction that Christ had suffered during the Passion. But it is just a kind of a detail to look at the hand of, so this is, again, John the Evangelist, and he's holding Christ, and just the way he's holding him, he puts his finger almost into the wound. And I think that's another thing. It's Jesus is dead, because otherwise he would feel that, he would feel the pain. I think that's another, it's a very telling small detail in this painting, that John's finger kind of slips into the wound and Jesus is not responding. So it's a sign Jesus is dead at this point. Christ has died.
I find what you write here about the contrast between his life and his art to be kind of extreme.
So the contrast between
Caravaggio's life and his art.
Yes, yes, that's definitely, and it has filled, many books have been filled about that. I don't know, I'm not here to defend him, and how can we, he was very violent, he was brutal, he had a short temper, and that obviously got him into trouble, and he actually killed someone. However, I mean, maybe that was his way of dealing with his sins, to give us these wonderful works of art, which are absolutely stunning. Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of things what I wanted to show. So this is the famous Pietà by Michelangelo. We have reflected on it on our Lenten series in 2022, actually, is one of the first ones. And the arm of Jesus, the way Michelangelo had sculpted that is something that we will see again and again in different works of art. So artists have looked back onto that again and again, just as really, again, very telling way of showing us that Christ has died, because that's really kind of how an arm would fall if someone is without life. And Caravaggio has taken that and implemented that very much into his own work of art.
I just have a question about the hand by John. Is that Mary? Mary's hand?
Oh yes, yeah.
And I find it interesting, since Jesus said, you are his mother, and gave them to each other, that she almost is reaching to console him as he lays Jesus down.
Yeah, I think that's a lovely, yeah, so she, kind of coming back to the three Marys, Mary of Clopas, she kind of puts her hands up, and yeah, it could be calling in the Holy Spirit, or mourning loudly, she might be crying out. We have Mary Magdalene very quietly sobbing into her handkerchief, and the Virgin Mary, she's stretching out her hands, and as you say, she's trying to touch Jesus Christ, and as you wonderfully said, you maybe console him before they lower him onto the stone slab. There's a little bit of, I don't know, controversy, but there's art historians, we always need to remember, so there is no manual by the artist, right? The artist painted these works of art for us, but there's not an explanation to say, okay, this is this and this and this, and this is what I wanted to tell you with this work of art. Since Nicodemus is in the painting, and it's only in the Gospel of Matthew that he's mentioned, and he brings the spices. In the other three Gospels, it's the women that bring the spices the day afterwards. So this painting has been interpreted that it's not so much the lowering of Christ's body into the tomb, but actually lowering him onto the stone slab for his anointment. And I think that's a good explanation. I think if one wanted to go with because the title is also the entombment, then it actually, I think it's again coming back to the Counter-Reformation and what they wanted to accomplish, is because where is the tomb? I mean, where is so they would have to lower Jesus Christ into our space to make that happen. And again, I think that is actually for me also a very intriguing explanation, because they have to lower him into our space. He would be right with us. So I thought that was very interesting. One thing I would like, and we have to move on. So this is Nicodemus, and art historians over the centuries have found out that this is actually the face of Michelangelo. Michelangelo himself, as we know, has created the Pietà, and that was the one that's in the St. Peter's Basilica. That was very early in his life. He created two more Pietàs that he never really finished, but there is one that's very similar like this, where he included Nicodemus and Mary Magdalene, and he had given Nicodemus his own face. And so I think, again, Caravaggio must have seen it, or heard of it, or maybe seen a print, and that it was appealing to him. So he introduced Michelangelo's face as the face of Nicodemus. So, yes, I would like to move on. So, and I would like to leave this work of art with the following question. Which of the figures in the painting represents how I would deal with such great suffering? Our second painting is the Resurrection, created by Matthias Grünewald, circa 1512 to 1516. It is on a side panel of a complex polytriptych altarpiece, which is now at the Unterlinden Museum in Colmar in France. A triptych is artwork that's made out of 3 panels or 3 pieces. And as I introduce the artist, you can follow along on the handout. Matthias Grünewald was a German Gothic painter born between 1470 and 1480. He is believed to have died in 1528. He was a contemporary of Leonardo da Vinci, Albert Dürer, and Michelangelo. And they are all masters of the High Renaissance. Grünewald, however, ignored their new artistic developments and continued to produce works of art firmly rooted in the Gothic style from the late Middle Ages. Many of Grünewald's works have been lost. Most of the small number of his surviving paintings are religious works, painted with tremendous emotion, exposing the great suffering of Christ. And I will show you a couple of images walking you through this rather complex piece of work of art, is this altarpiece. So the polytriptych altarpiece, of which the Resurrection is one part, was commissioned for the monastery of St. Anthony in Isenheim. The monastery was attached to a hospital that treated patients suffering from skin conditions, including the often deadly ergotism, also known as St. Anthony fire, which is a fungal infection, as well as leprosy and plague. And on this, you can see, so it's the altarpiece, and we're going to go through the different levels, but in this, the way they set it up, they took the altarpiece apart and show you the individual levels of the altarpiece. But I will show you image by image, so we're going to go through this. The altarpiece consists of complex multi-layered moving parts that combine paintings by Grünewald with sculptures by Nicholas Hagenauer. The crucifixion painting, which we reflected on last year during our Lenten reflection, is displayed when the altarpiece shutters are closed. Therefore, visible most days of the week, as it's shown here. So this is what you would see most of the days if you walked into the monastery. And I'm sorry, the red comes out a bit, it's a bit harsh, but on Sundays and other feast days, particularly those in honor of the Virgin Mary, the altarpiece would be opened to reveal the second layer of panels, displaying 3 paintings: the Annunciation, Christ's birth, and Christ's resurrection, which we will talk about in detail in a minute. So the Annunciation, the birth of Christ, which is actually 2 individual paintings, and then the resurrection. On the feast day of St. Anthony the Great, on January 17th, a third and final layer of the panel would be opened and reveal a group of Hagenauer statues, including St. Anthony, flanked by St. Augustine and St. Jerome. For our reflection tonight, we will focus on the resurrection scene. And for this painting, I would like to quote from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 28, verses 4 to 6. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven. The guards were shaken with fear of him and became like dead men. Then the angel said to the women in reply, "Do not be afraid. I know that you are seeking Jesus, the crucified. He is not here, for he has been raised, just as he said." And yeah, any suggestions, comments, reflections?
You know, I've seen this painting before, and I'm just shocked at what time period it was painted, because the Christ figure looks just like William Blake did it to me. Are you familiar with William Blake, his etchings?
Yeah.
To me, it looks just like that. And then when you look at the swooning soldiers, the fallen soldiers, they look almost like Dali did them. It's very modern looking. It's shocking that it was written, that it was painted at the time that it was. To me,
Yeah.
it's my perception.
Oh no, and that's actually interesting. There has been, if you think of some works by, I forgot his first name, by Bosch, which was also, Hieronymus Bosch. When you look at some of his works, they're futuristic in some sense. And this one as well, it's has, kind of different, yeah. So we can, so I think when actually I'm just gonna quick. So this was the crucifixion, and last week we commented on some of the work that sometimes artists choose, in particular the Italians, not to depict the suffering or the inflictions on Christ that he suffered through the Passion, which was absolutely gruesome. And someone, I think, it might have been in you, Marco, many people would not even get through the flagellation and all the treatment before they even would be put on the cross. So it was very, very gruesome. Grunewald had gone the other way, basically. He very much depicted all the suffering and the cruelty that Christ had gone through. In addition, that since it was close to the hospital with patients that suffered a lot of skin lesions, he implemented those into the painting just to be, to make it easier for the patients to relate to the suffering of Jesus Christ. And then, if we then jump forward to see what can come after, because here Grunewald depicts Christ beautiful. He kept the wounds in his hands, but someone mentioned it, he's wearing it almost as jewel. And his skin is beautiful, he's radiant, there's a radiant light behind him. And it's that connection between the death and resurrection, which we were all hoping for. And Jesus Christ shows us that that's the way we're gonna go. And yeah, so the soldiers, kind of a word on the soldiers down here. So again, that was only in the Gospel of Matthew does it speak about that someone had gone to Pilate and asked to have soldiers stationed at the tomb just to make sure that no one would steal the body of Christ, and then they would tell us that he has been resurrected. So so these are the soldiers that were stationed at the tomb of Christ. And as we hear in the gospel reading, they were knocked over. It's almost like Jesus exploded out of the tomb to come back to show us he has been resurrected. And I think Grunewald was not necessarily concerned to show the exit of Christ realistically. He was much more interested in showing us the spiritual truth and behind this physical event. Christ is victorious over death, and not just for himself, but for us too. So, yeah, and just to give enough time also for our third work of art, I would like to leave you with the question: do I fully understand that the resurrection is a pivotal event in the history of the world, definitely connecting God and man? Yeah. And appropriately, our third and last work of this art series this year is the bronze sculpture Mary Waiting, which is right over here. It was created by Joseph Asper in 2004. Joseph Asper grew up in an Irish family, attending the St. Immedius parish in San Francisco. He's the second son of Anna and Thomas Asper. Joe graduated from Archbishop Riordan High School, a Marianist school in San Francisco in 1963. He became a Marianist novice in Santa Cruz before being admitted to the University of Dayton, where he majored in English with a minor in art. For 10 years, he taught English, art, and film at Marianist high schools and acquired a master's degree in art history and painting. During the 1980s, Joe was called to participate in design and construction of the Marianist Center in Cupertino. He oversaw interiors, furnishings, and artworks, such as stained glass windows, paintings, and sculptures. Joe describes his involvement with the project as a defining moment of his life as an artist. For more than 40 years, Joe has demonstrated great versatility with the creation of art in a broad range of media such as stained glass, painting, furniture, sketching, airbrush, clay, graphic design, and sculpture. And in 1987, Joe was chosen to design the stadium platform, liturgical furnishings, and graphics for the visit of Pope John Paul II to San Francisco. This is just a brief list of Joe's wonderful accomplishments. And for this work of art, I would like to quote from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 2, verse 19. "And Mary kept all these things, reflecting on them in her heart." And I would like to open this up. I guess some are familiar with the sculpture and maybe some not. And then I invite you at the end to maybe step into the Marian shrine and look at her.
You said that sometimes they use models, like one was an actual Michelangelo in another painting. Is this a lady based on any particular person, his mother, somebody new, or is just an ordinary woman he painted?
Mm-hmm. So that's a very good question. Yes, and sometimes artists use models and they stay quite close to their resemblance. In this particular case, when the sculpture was specifically created for St. John the Co-Cathedral, and so Father Mann and Joe were in conversation, and the request or the thought was to create a woman's face that was kind of international even. So no, it's not based on anyone in particular, but even to make it in a way universal, because we are so close to the Mayo Clinic and a lot of patients come here from all over the world, and the hope was to create a Marian sculpture that could speak to everyone. Yeah, and also in this case, it was asked to depict her as a mature woman. If we think of Pietà by Michelangelo, Mary was very young. And that has created, I mean, some people think about it very positively, but it also had created some controversy or some criticism. And artists will respond to that differently. In this case, it was asked to portray her as a mature woman who has gone naturally through raising her child, raising Jesus Christ, and has gone through the suffering of his death. So it's Mary Waiting is the title of this work, and it's also supposed to be the time frame between Christ's crucifixion but before his resurrection. So she's waiting with us for the resurrection of Christ. Yeah, anyone's response? How do you, when you see her, how do you respond to her? Do you have any personal reflections on her? I think the hands are very interesting.
If you look at the hands on the statue, they're worn, they're burnished by humans touching them.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's meant something to people.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for saying that. And I also I kind of took a particular picture of it. That is what it is. People are drawn to her, and her hands, the artist, there was also a nice, so because the artist is still alive and the artist worked with the church, so we have some of his words. And one thing he said was, it was very difficult for him to create the hands because he wanted the hands to be inviting, to be open, to make us wanting to touch them and pray together with Mary for all our desires or wishes or the things we wanted to ask her. Yes, that's right. So they're quite polished. Yes.
You have a secondary picture on the same page, on the lower. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe you could tell us.
So on the lower right. So beside, and we can, I just want to keep this here for our online audience, but later on. So as you can see here, there is a little pedestal, and it's the crown of thorns of Jesus Christ. Again, to make that connection between his passion, his suffering, and Mary waiting for his resurrection. Yeah. And I found actually a lovely write-up that someone had published online, and she described her experience with the Mary sculpture. Her husband had been in the hospital. He was very ill, and so she describes her deep connection with the Mary sculpture, and that she would come here and sit with her. And she almost felt like Mary was inviting her to just sit down, just rest with me, and just let's wait. And I think that's what we have to do too in many situations in our life, that they're hard. Something happens that we didn't want to happen. We have to get through it, and then hopefully through our faith, we are able to get through it. But we sometimes have to wait for that answer to come. We quite often say, if a door closes, God will open a window. Just might take a moment. So yes, guess I can I entice anyone to share their personal reflections?
Well, getting back to the hands, to me they sort of signal two things. One is the way that they're open and empty is that Mary is emptied at this point. It's all gone. You know, she has nothing, you know, her life experience to this point, she may have hope, but we don't know, maybe she was in despair, who knows, you know. And you can kind of see that, but it also is an invitation, you know, they are reaching out open, which is a way to beckon someone, you know, come to mama, you know, that sort of thing. So it's a combination, that gesture is a combination of those two visual cues to me.
Yes.
I think her expression is it's sort of neutral, but not indifferent, and inviting whatever, it's a very listening expression, inviting whatever we have to bring to her, and that she would be familiar with what we bring and ready to be with us in that.
Yes. Yep.
It's interesting of the title of Mary Waiting. So her son has died but hasn't risen yet. So one wonders what's going through her mind. It reminds me a little bit of the painting Christ of St. John of the Cross by Dali, where again there's a desolate area. There's ships, or the fishing boats are up in the sand, and people just don't know what to do, what to think. And what were the apostles thinking? And so the waiting is a key part of, you know, the title has great meaning.
And even if she knew of the resurrection, or that her son would live again, I think it still doesn't take away the suffering she has gone through with him. I mean, she obviously has seen her own child being brutally mishandled and being killed on the cross. Even though she was probably hoping, or she knew that Jesus Christ was the Messiah and would show us life everlasting, it still doesn't take that away, I think, that suffering that she had to go through in that time frame. So, yes, so thank you very much for being here and coming, and I will end our 2025 Lenten and Easter reflection series with the following question. As Mary is mourning the death of her son with anticipation of his resurrection, can we faithfully wait with Mary for God to resolve suffering in our own lives and lead us to eternal salvation? And thank you very much. Happy Easter.